Hello, welcome back to Mexim Calc. My name is Kyle, and today we are going to be creating a GPA calculator app. To get started, make sure you are signed in and navigate to the Create page. We offer free and premium templates, but for now, since we are learning, we will just create a new blank app. Before we get started editing our app, let's take a look at a small demonstration of the app so that we know what we are creating. Here is an example GPA calculator. This is a table format, and in the first column we have the subject with a list of subjects, and in the second column we have a list of grades. We can add more rows for the more classes, and if we click Submit, it will print out the table and also give us an average of our classes. Let's get started on editing our app. As we know, to edit an app in Mexim Calc, there are 6 steps. The first step is the info. Here is where there's basic info for the app, and we will fill it out right now. The name we can set to GPA calculator. A description of the app is a simple GPA calculator. For now, I will set the category as tutorial, as well as the tag, but you can set this to anything you want. Additionally, you can also change the primary or secondary images for your app. For now, I will leave this as the default ones. Now that we are done with step 1, let us move on to step 2, which is the inputs. For now, let us delete this input group and start from fresh. As we know, we want to create a GPA calculator table. Instead of using a basic input group, let's use a table group. This will allow us to have a more formatted input group and allow us to add rows if needed. Let us give a title to this input group. GPA average calculator. In every table, there must be a header row. To do so, let's drag in some rich text into the header. You can see that the rich text were forced to a certain size and that we cannot make them bigger. As we know from our demo app, we only want 2 columns. To change the number of columns, click the Edit Table Group icon, and this will pop up. This is where we edited the title. The name of the table group is how it will be referenced in the Python code. A table group is similar to an array or a matrix, a 2D matrix, and that's how we will use it in the Python code. We will see this when we are editing step 3. For now, we will simply leave it as table 0. If you need any assistance, hover over the question mark icon, and it will give some information on the parameters and also link to the documentation. Now we can edit the number of columns in the table. As we know, we only want 2 columns, the subject and the grade, so we can change this to 2. Click Apply Changes. Now we can see that the rich text take up half the width each. We will edit them to have the appropriate titles. So this will be subject. Let's make it bold. And this will be grade. In each row, we want a subject and a grade. And the subject will be a text input, while the grade will be a number input. So let us add the first row. We can add a text input for the subject and a number input for the grade. Notice how they are automatically sized to the column width, and you cannot change this. To edit the input, click the pencil icon, and we can edit the text input for the subject. In the label, we will call it subject, and we can leave in this row. This row feature will put in the row number for each row. For example, the header row will be row 0, and any row after that will be row 1, 2, 3, 4. As you can see here, it says new input 1, where the 1 is the row number. We will rename this to subject with the row number. For example, subject 1, subject 2. A default value, let us put math. It is required, and let's edit some of the advanced options. We will set the min length to 1, and we can leave all the other lengths as is. Click Apply Changes to save these changes. You can now see that it says subject 1 with the default value of math. We can also see that the table 0 is displayed as a matrix. In this case, this is table 0, first row, 0th column, and it's 0 based. If you go over to the grade here, it's the first row and the first column, or index 1. Let's now edit the number input. Let's give it a name of grade, default units, a default value of 90, and since it's a grade, we want a minimum of 0, a maximum of 100, and a step size of 0.1. Let's click Apply Changes to save this. In our table, we want at least 2 or 3 rows. We can use this duplicate row feature when editing an app to quickly duplicate the last rows instead of having to manually make them. Let us try this out. We can now see that there's subject 1, subject 2, grade 1, and grade 2. Let's make a minimum of 3. We also want to allow the user to add rows themselves. An example of this is this Add Row button, where the user of your app can add or delete rows. This allows for a variable number of courses in the GPA calculator. To edit this, click the edit icon for the table. The dynamic table feature is a premium feature. If you are not subscribed to the premium Mexim Calc, you will not be able to use this feature, and you can just try out your GPA calculator as is. I will create this demo using this premium feature to showcase how awesome it is. The dynamic table allows the user to control, within a limit, the number of rows in the table. We can click to enable this. We then have some options. We can set the maximum number of rows that can be in this table, and these do not include the header rows. So currently in the table, we have 3 rows. Let's set the maximum to 10 and the minimum to 3. The row group size is how many rows are added at a time. Currently, we just want the user to be able to add or delete 1 row at a time. Click Apply Changes to save. If we go to Preview App, we can now see that there is an Add Row button, and the user can add or delete rows. Finally, before moving on to the code, step 3, let's make sure that the mobile input layout is correct. Looking at this, it seems pretty good. Now that we are happy with the mobile layout, let's go to step 3, the code. In step 3, we will need to reference the table matrix in order to use it in the code. To do so, we can copy the table from the input variables and access it in the Python code. We also want some headers for our output table. So headers is equal to subject Here we are just manually inputting them. This table object, we would like to transform into an HTML table to be able to output it. Before that, let's calculate the average of the courses. If you are using the dynamic table feature, you will not know the number of rows in the table, since the user could add or delete rows. To get the number of rows, we can use the length of this input table. We can then set the sum to 0, and we will need to loop through each row to get the grade, sum it up, and then calculate the average. To do so, we will do a simple for loop from 0 to rows, and sum up So in this case, we will get I, which is looping through the rows. And then 1 is going to be the first column, so that's going to be the grade column. Do not forget that it is 0 indexed. So the first column is actually 0, and then the column with index 1 is the second column, so that's the grade column. The average is simply the sum over the number of rows. We want to return this average to be able to output it. In our example, we also returned the table and outputted the table. If we want to do that, we can make use of the MeximCalc library. The MeximCalc library has a lot of features to be able to output tables and spreadsheets in our outputs. In this case, we will transform the table into an HTML table using MSC library. This will allow us to output it. This is pretty simple, and it's simply msc.print table, and we will have the headers as well as the input table. We can then return this table as well. Before moving on to step 4, let us check the debug code. We can see that there are 3 courses. They're all named math, and they all have an average of 90. That is fine for now. Let's just debug this. We can see that an HTML table is returned, and an average of 90 is returned. This seems correct. One thing we can do is that the average in that case was 90. It was a nice whole number. In other cases, it could be a float with many decimal points. Let us use a quick way to limit the decimal points to 2, since that will be the only important decimal places for a class average. We can simply use an F string and limit it to .2 after the decimal place, so 2 decimal places. This is a pretty simple way to do it. Now we can move on to step 4, the output. In this case, we want to display the table as well as the average. To display the table, head to the outputs and copy the table. This will allow us to display an HTML table. We can then display the average. Let's make this bold, and then copy the average output. And this will be the average. We move on to step 5, the docs. For now, we can leave the docs blank, but feel free to leave some information here if you are building more complex apps. We then have step 6, which is the preview. We can run our app here to make sure that it works correctly. Let's change up our values a bit. So the subject 2 will be science, and subject 3 will be history. We have a grade of 90, 80, and 73. We can then click Submit. As you can see, we have Math 90, Science 80, History 73, and an average of 81 with 2 decimal places. You can then add a row, potentially Psychology, with an average of 100. Let's click Submit to resubmit, and now you can see that your average has gone up to 85.75. Once you are happy with your app, you must publish the changes. Congratulations, your app is now on MeximCalc for anyone to use. You can share it with family or friends, or run the app as many times as you would like. Thank you very much for taking the time to learn with us, and I wish you all the best with MeximCalc.